We are live. Excellent. Welcome,
Awesome.
everybody. Thank you for joining us on the first of the Search for a Cure web series, episode 1. We're going to be looking at some really unique and interesting data that's been aggregated by a new company out of New Jersey that's looking at a lot of different pharmaceutical research. And specifically today, we're going to focus on what's going on in the COVID space because that's the topic first and foremost on everyone's mind. Joining me today, my name is Rob Statz. I'm your host. Joining me is Akhil Shan and Gayathri Raghupathy, who are both with Kognitic, and they, what should I say about them? Akhil has founded the company. He's got a great algorithm behind it. I'll let him talk about that. And Gayathri is the scientific lead for the company. She's going to help us navigate or understand how navigating this data can help us understand what's going on in the space of clinical trials for COVID vaccines and treatments. Akhil, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are very excited to present, what clinical development is going on in the COVID-19 field. So with that, I briefly wanted to touch on our data. So this is not data that we have generated, right? So this is publicly available data from clinicaltrials.gov and from the WHO database, which captures clinical trials running all over the world. So, and the reason we got this platform out was to help, public, governments, physicians, pharma companies, whoever is interested, so that they can have access and understand this data. The goals of a platform are, basically these three, right? Real-time tracking of clinical trials. They are changing rapidly. I mean, you can ask different people. They thought maybe there are 50 trials going on, maybe 100, 200. So you'll see how many trials are going on. And this evolves rapidly every day. And then the other goal was to make it easy to digest this complex scientific information in a visual format. So it's easy to understand. Where are these trials, what kind of trials they are, and so on and so forth. And Gayathri will take you through this. And the biggest thing is, how do these different drugs break down? Are they treatments? Are they vaccine? What's a treatment? What's a vaccine? Just in a very simplified, easy to understand way. So with that, Gayathri, please take it over.
Sure. Thanks, Akhil. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So as Akhil was mentioning, the objective of our platform, or the objective of this discussion, is to learn about the current trends in finding treatments and vaccines for COVID-19 and how you can leverage the real-time dashboard that we built out to kind of stay in pace with these treatments and vaccines that are ongoing right now. So in terms of agenda, we're going to talk about the basics of clinical trial, and then we'll dive right into our dashboard to learn about the treatment and the vaccine landscape. And we'll open up for questions. And please do post your comments as we go through this discussion, and we'll address them in the end. So let's start off with the fundamentals of clinical trials. So we believe we might have a wide range of audience with different backgrounds. And so we just want to revisit the basics of clinical trials. So what is a clinical trial, right? So it basically is a type of study or research that's conducted to understand if a drug is going to be effective in treating a disease. And typically the way it starts is at a preclinical level where, in a lab, they would test out in a test tube and then in an animal to see if a drug is actually effective and if it's safe. And then once some kind of efficacy is seen there at that point, it enters into the clinical trials, which is a highly regulated process because you don't want to be marketing unsafe drugs, So it's a very structured and a highly regulated process with 4 phases. The first phase will bring in is a safety study where they bring in a limited number of healthy volunteers, anywhere from 20 to 80, let's say, and they test the drug on them. And if it's proven to be safe enough, then it enters into phase 2, where hundreds of participants are enrolled, and then the drug is tested for its efficacy or if its effectiveness to treat the disease. And then once success is seen, it then proceeds into phase 3, which is the next step, and which is then entering into thousands of participants. And then towards the end of that phase 3, if the drug had some positive outcome, then the trial sponsor submits an application to FDA in the United States. asking for to review the data and see if it could be approved, and FDA reviews, approves the data, approves the drug, and then it enters into phase 4 where it's marketed, and then you're looking at real evidence of how the drug is doing in a mainstream population. So we see how complex and how structured and regulated this process is. And in terms of timeline, it's a very time-intensive process. It can take from months. You're looking at like 1 to 6 months, then 3 to 1.5 years, and phase 3 can go on for like anywhere from 1 to 3-4 years, and so forth. So it's quite a time-intensive process. And given the current circumstances, this kind of a typical time frame wouldn't be fitting, right? So it has to move at a much more faster, lightning speed, and that's kind of what we see a lot of collaborative efforts coming through, and everyone's working around the clock to kind of like really, instead of making this a sequential process, kind of try to like run it as a more parallel approach in terms of how can we bring this drug development process to match with the pandemic speed, or the speed at which COVID is spreading, right? So a lot of efforts are ongoing, and we are seeing some positive data out there. And as of last week, some of us might know that remdesivir, which is an anti-malarial drug, a Gilead's product, and a phase 3 trial based on a phase 3 trial's data, it got emergency use authorization approval with FDA just about last week. And this drug initiated at phase 3. And just want to pause here and highlight that, this drug does not necessarily have to go through phase 1 and phase 2 because it's a drug that was previously developed for Ebola, and the safety profile and certain effectiveness of it has been established previously. So it was able to initiate right into phase 3 for COVID. And what we're looking at right now is the timeline between when the first patient was enrolled in February to when this emergency use authorization came about last week. And that time frame is 3 months. So really want to highlight that, things are happening at a faster speed here. And it's very reassuring to know that, remdesivir did show some reduction in recovery time. While these are preliminary results, it most likely is not a cure, but, it's very promising, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. And, it definitely there is still a need for more treatments and vaccines to be developed and studied while this is out there, while these results are out there. And that is what we're going to take you through the dashboard in terms of learning about what are the other types of treatments and what are the approaches that are being done in terms of finding a vaccine for COVID. So with that, I'm going to end the presentation here, and we're going to jump right into the the dashboard. So let's go here. So here is our dashboard, which is covid19.kognitic.com. And what we're basically doing is, like as Akhil was mentioning earlier, we're tapping into reliable sources such as CT.gov, clinicaltrials.gov from NIH, or the WHO trial databases, and bringing in the trials, categorizing them and bucketing them in a way and putting them in a visually pleasing format so it's easy to understand. So right now, as we're looking at this number, there are more than 1,000 trials, and we feel the need that it's important to bring about, like, what are these trials? What are they doing? What kind of drugs are they studying? What's the timeline associated with this? So that's what we're doing in this platform. And this is real time, so we'd update it every day. So you can go through this and understand what kind of efforts are ongoing. And it's built in a way so it's understandable for both scientists and public audience as well. So what we're seeing is in January, there were just 7 trials, and there's been such a leap, with a steady increase in bringing this up to 1,163 trials. So there's been a lot of efforts that are ongoing in terms of, but by looking at these numbers, that's what it says. And let's I'm scrolling down to show you, at the location, like the country level, where are these efforts distributed? So as we can see from the bar on the right side, China seems to have has the most number of trials. What we have been noticing is since last week, or since the last few weeks, what we've been noticing is that this the growth in the addition of new trials is sort of leveling off, coming in from China, and that's the kind of takeaway we've had based on what's happening in China so far. And
Gayathri, how are things with trials in the US?
So with the US, so let's take a look at it here. So what we can do is, I'm just going to go to this countries block here and then click on United States as a filter. So let's scroll up to see what the numbers look like. So I mean, right now it looks like there is still a steady increase for the United States-based trials, and we're seeing that this is, kind of increasing. It'll be interesting to watch how this is going to look like through May and June. So yeah, let's see how that looks like. So I'm going to close
And this is
this.
vaccines. I'm sorry for interrupting. This is vaccines and treatments.
Right. So when I
177.
click on this, it's yes. This shows both vaccines and treatments, and we're going to take a look at the split up of vaccines and treatments like right now. So here this pie chart basically shows what kind of approaches are being taken, right? So if there is there are basically two modes of approaches to this issue. One, to this issue of dealing with COVID. One is treatment based, and the other is vaccine based. So what we're seeing here in this pie chart on the left here is that, clearly the treatments approach is much more like, more than 96%, and the vaccine approach here. And so that's the trend we're seeing right now, and which makes more sense, right? Scientifically and feasibility-wise speaking.
So Gayathri, what's the basic difference between like a treatment and a vaccine?
So, so yes, that's good to clarify that, right? So a treatment is, typically a drug or like a non-drug therapy, like cell therapy or so forth. The goal of that is to dampen the severity of the disease or to reduce the symptoms associated with the disease, not necessarily like be 100% cure for the disease, right? Vaccine, on the other hand, would kind of be considered the ultimate weapon in like dealing with this disease, sort of close to a cure and making us immune to coronavirus. So the vaccine is what everyone's really looking forward to, but at the same time, like, vaccines take a lot of time to develop. So the treatments are what we have. We have a lot of drugs in hand. We're trying to repurpose it and see what's going to be successful. So to that point, let's take a look at this graph here, which shows like studies by treatment, breakdown of studies by treatment here, right? So as I was mentioning just now, you can see that the majority of the trials are being run with anti-malarial drugs or anti-inflammatory drugs or antiviral drugs. So we're trying to, the clinical efforts ongoing right now are repurposing these drugs to see what would be effective. And especially with anti-inflammatory drugs, it's to, the disease is set to kind of really put your immune system on a overdrive mode, and anti-inflammatory drugs could help in dampening that sort of immune response. So here, this is basically the breakdown that we're seeing right now for the drug.
Any new therapies within this coming up that are of interest?
So plasma therapy has been the one indicated here. The plasma therapy has been gaining a lot of traction, and it's going to be very interesting to watch how this is going to pan out. So what the therapy mainly is the blood from a patient who recovered from COVID would be taken, and plasma would be separated from that, and the plasma would then be infused into COVID patients, and with the idea that the plasma should contain neutralizing antibodies towards the virus, and that way we hope that it would help the COVID patients recover. Now, there are going to be a lot of supply issues, and feasibility is still in question. And but there is research ongoing to see if they could somehow isolate and take those antibodies from that plasma and make that into a drug. So labs like example in Rockefeller University are working on something like that as well. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what's up and coming with the plasma therapy approach. So next, let's look at the vaccines, right? So we have the vaccine chart here on the right. And with the vaccines here, what we're seeing is a breakdown of different types of vaccines that are being tested right now, that are being planned to study. So there are a lot of preclinical vaccine development ongoing, and what we're showing here is only the trial, the ones that have been registered into trials, and there are still more than 50 or 60 vaccines going on in preclinical studies as well. So with this, why we're seeing so many different types of vaccine is that the researchers are trying to attack this virus, either using its protein or using its genetic material or using the weakened form of the virus itself, so that they're taking these multiple approaches to see to take it out and put it into the body and see to teach the immune system that, hey, this is a virus, next time you encounter it, kill it, sort of thing. So there are various ways of approaching this vaccine situation, and this is what everyone's very, very eager about, right? So because this would be the sort of like like I mentioned earlier, sort of like the cure to virus
Right.
and dealing with the situation in the best way we can.
So Moderna and Pfizer have been in the news of late, right? Those are the big two news that are coming out, and the Oxford one. What's your take on it with the data?
Sure. So so with the Pfizer and Moderna ones, those both are interesting. Those both are mRNA based vaccines. So I'm going to go here to vaccine and click on RNA vaccine as a filter. And let's scroll down to look at, so that's Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech in collaboration. And these are the two vaccines, mRNA 1273 and the BNT vaccine. So these are going to be very interesting because these are mRNA-based vaccines. And until now, there's not been an mRNA vaccine that's been, in reality used in humans. So it's going to be very a novel approach. It could counteract, some of the supply issues, because it's said to be very easier to produce, and manufacturing could be a big deal with vaccines when it has to be at a global scale if we have to do it, right? So these vaccines could really be useful, and if they show some success, it could be like a breakthrough sort of thing in terms of the vaccine approach. And let's take a quick look at their timeline here at the bottom. So Pfizer just started their trial like just a couple of days ago, like kind of in terms of like recruiting or starting testing on their patients. So the timeline for the Pfizer looks like the Pfizer BioNTech BNT vaccine looks like it's the primary completion date, or the completion of the study, is set at Jan 2023, and for the Moderna is set at 2021. Well, these have been timelines that have been set to complete the study. Preliminary data could come through at any point of this timeline, and to kind of assess. And there are promises being made by some of these companies that it could be as soon as this year. So and especially for the University of Oxford one that's been studying, which is set to come out as soon as September. So I believe we're all hoping for the best, and hope that the best results will be seen from some of these approaches.
Right.
So I think hopefully we've kind of like, the main takeaway here is that lots of treatment approaches and quite a few vaccine approaches have also hit the ground running, and things are definitely moving at a faster pace, and multiple approaches are ongoing, and we hope that one of it succeeds and really gets all of us out of the situation. That's kind of, and things are looking hopeful from what we're seeing with remdesivir at least. So I think with that, we're going to pause here, and maybe Rob and Michelle, like if you would want to see if there are any questions for us.
Sure.
Hi,
Yeah.
Gayathri. Sorry, Rob, I beat you to it. So I'm looking here on our live post, and I do see some questions coming in. One person wants to know, what are some of the challenges of conducting clinical trials during a pandemic, and how can this platform be helpful in that process?
So it's extremely challenging to conduct a clinical trial at this pace. I mean, it's extremely challenging to do a clinical trial even in regular situation, right? So, and it's much more difficult given these extraordinary times with the speed at which things have to go. But it also, it presents this immense challenge of having to balance scientifically and ethically sound kind of clinical trial design, and kind of like align it with the speed and the quality of the drugs that would come out of this. So it's a complex challenge. One of the ways our platform, can help with is, in terms of understanding the trial design. So a gold standard of a trial design is to have a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial. And with this platform, like I'm going to show you this filter here where there's an allocation. You can click on randomized, let's say, and that'll help you isolate and check through some of the randomized trials that are going on and see what's in the works. And in our roadmap is to bring in filters for the blinding and also the control. So so the users would be able to break down these studies based on those gold standard approaches. Hopefully that answers the question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gayathri, I have a question. You mentioned double-blinded and blinded. For people who are more like me and not very founded in science, don't have a background there, have heavy background there. What does that mean? Why is that important?
So the most important thing in these trials is to, especially when it's done in larger population, is once the trial data comes out, it has to be in a way where you can get an effective analysis out of it and without any bias. And these kind of gold standard settings will help you not run through those biases. So what a randomized setting means is that if you have, let's say, 20 patients, each of those 20 patients, like you put them into groups, let's say group 1 gets drug A and group 2 gets a placebo, they're randomly given, a computer, like right now, computer algorithm will generate like randomly that, person, let's say Rob gets drug A or placebo randomly, like you, and blinding means that you wouldn't know which drug you got, and the trial conductor wouldn't know which drug they gave you. So it's blinded, meaning that both of you are blind of the details associated with who got what drug. The goal is to make sure that it's an unbiased analysis of data so that nobody knows what they got and people are getting these drugs randomly and so forth. So that's the best way, typically that's the best way to run a clinical trial.
Got it. Michelle, so Michelle is our analyst. She's in the background and she's been monitoring our live streams. And so anyone who's got questions can certainly enter them there if you're watching on Facebook, or if you're in Zoom. I've got my eyes on that. In fact, I have one here. During these clinical trials, do they include individuals that had the COVID-19 already and recovered? That's.
So I think some of those kind of patients would be recruited in plasma therapies potentially to see if, to kind of understand if they could take their, if they would be interested in donating their blood to take the plasma therapy that I mentioned before. So that could be a great approach, or to study what kind of antibodies are effective in treating the virus. So it definitely could be a great approach to do that.
Okay. Michelle, anything from Facebook?
Yeah, we have another question. So one listener wants to know, how often is this dashboard updated, and how do you guys go about getting all this information?
I can take that one up. So the dashboard is updated on a daily basis. Any new trial that comes up is immediately in our system. The way we do it is we have a lot of technology behind this platform, and all of our algorithms run pretty much 24/7 to make sure that every clinical trial is in.
And I just wanted to mention that I put up the slide to show that these are some recommended resource and trackers. If you're interested in receiving a slide, please comment or shoot us an email shown there, and we would be happy to share these additional resources with you.
Excellent. With that, folks, we are right on time. Thank you, Gayathri. Thank you, Akhil. I appreciate it, and look forward to tracking this. Watching the development of, and everyone's eyes are on this, right? Where's the vaccine coming from? Yeah. What treatments are coming out? And we can expect an update, another one, about a week or so.
Yes, we plan on doing this every week. So.
All right. Excellent. All right, folks. Well, thank you everyone for your time. And if you have any additional questions, you can certainly find us info@cognitic.com and shoot it there. You can reach us through the website on the list here as well. And look forward to checking in with you next week. Have a great one.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Rob, for hosting.